I think the biblical worldview is such a huge thing. Like, would I love for my son to be an engineer? Sure, that would be awesome. But I would also love for him to know God and to share that with everybody that he meets.
Welcome to another episode of the Carpe Fide podcast, where if the shoe fits, you wear it.
And if the truth hurts, you bear it.
I am Justin Gruber.
And I am Jesse Gruber.
And today we hope you will seize the faith. Welcome to another episode of the Carpe Fide podcast. We're back.
We are back.
And better than ever. Yeah, all right. That remains to be seen. But tonight we do have a very special guest. We're looking forward to this conversation. Literally, Jesse has been chomping at the bit to have this wonderful guest on. And so tonight we're going to try to unpack and inform on one of the topics that we've covered a lot with education, but that would be primarily understanding something about homeschooling. Woo. And addressing some of the issues that you may have, maybe even some of the fears and concerns that you have about homeschooling. And we're going to do that with a guest who is perfectly equipped to handle those situations. And that is one Nicki Truesdell. And so we're very excited to have you on tonight, Nicki. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
It is really our pleasure. We're so excited to talk to you about Anyone Can Homeschool. We're excited to hear your story. But with the fact that many of our listeners may not have as much information about you as we have, particularly as Jesse is super excited and has talked about you so much.
Like, we've got to get this interview if we're going to do education.
And I'm like, let's do it. So maybe if you would tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, this stage of life that you're at now, and maybe a little bit of how you got there without going too much into the Anyone Can Homeschool, because obviously we'll ask you about that as well.
Start with the short version. Well, I am married and have 5 children. 3 of my children have graduated from a lifetime of homeschooling. So my kids have never been to school, and I have 2 children that are still being educated at home. They're 12 and 15. And I'm also a grandmother now. I have 1 grandson and 1 grandbaby on the way. So that's kind of a whole new part of life that is just as fun as they say it is.
Awesome.
So I'm also a 2nd generation homeschooler. So I have, I just realized I have 40 years of homeschooling behind me now, between being a kid in the homeschool movement in the 1980s. And then I have kids that are very spread apart in age. So I've been homeschooling since the year 2000, which is a long time.
Yeah.
So, but as a kid, I started in 1983. So I have a little bit of experience in almost every part of homeschooling just because of a lot of circumstances I've been through in my life. And that's kind of what I'll talk about tonight, and how I came to write the book, Anyone Can Homeschool. But currently, like I said, I'm homeschooling my youngest 2 children, and I spend most of my time being a homemaker, and I do also publish out-of-print history books for my side business. So
I knew you'd be interested
anyway,
in that.
That's a whole other topic. So that's what I'm up to.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Again, I am really excited to have this interview. I homeschool. Me and my family homeschool, but we're very, very new. And so I read your book a few months ago. I think I've been following your Instagram account for a while, but I was like, all right, you know what? I think you posted about your book, and I'm like, you know what? All right, fine. I'll do that. I'll read it. And I was like, oh my gosh, she really does think that anyone can homeschool.
I mean, she's never met you, so I mean,
yeah, I guess that
anyone's such a broad strip. Maybe after the interview, she'll think twice.
Maybe.
No, but, I promise I won't.
But yeah, so moving on into kind of this book, I wanted to start with kind of a more broad question to kind of lay the foundation of kind of why we're talking about this, why you've done all that you've done with the homeschooling stuff. So my question is, do you think that there are any biblical principles that you personally have drawn from, or you personally believe are the foundation as to why you believe that parents would have the responsibility to educate their children?
I do. there are quite a few scriptures that lead me in this direction. And I know a lot of people like to say, well, the word homeschooling is not in the Bible, and the Bible doesn't tell us we have to homeschool our children. And that's true. It does not specifically say how we are supposed to educate our children. But the Bible's full of scriptures that teach us principles. And so the principles for raising children are pretty clear. And there are some biblical principles that don't even address children, but I believe they apply to all aspects of our Christian walk. But the one in Deuteronomy chapter 6, it's verses 6-9, where God is telling the Israelites to remember what he's done for them. But then he goes on to talk about how they should walk with their children, talk to them, teach them his commands and his principles while they walk, while they sit, when they eat, when they lie down, which pretty much describes the whole day, that he wanted them to always be with their children and always be instructing them. Yeah. Another scripture that we're familiar with in Ephesians 6, I think it's 6:4, it says, fathers, starts with saying for fathers not to provoke their children to wrath, but then it continues with, bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And I think that's just talking about, teaching them about God, teaching them his principles. And then one more that's kind of become a newer theme for me in the last couple of years is 1 Corinthians 3. I think it's verse 19. But it's actually repeated several times in 1 Corinthians, and it says that the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. And I apply that to every area of my life, especially when you just look at our secular world and the society that can influence us. And I apply that to education. The wisdom of this world is not working. And so it's just when you kind of pull back from our American school system and everything we've always ever known, and you look at the big picture and you realize the wisdom of this world is foolishness. Yeah. So let's try God's way instead. Let's try God's wisdom. Those are just three. There are more scriptures, and I think it just is a good idea for parents to look at the Bible as our instruction book and not go searching for things that talk about school or education, because you will find very little. But how are we supposed to live, and how do we teach our children to live that way? And I believe the home education is one of the best ways to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Where I think Justin and I, we've talked about the Shema and Deuteronomy. We've talked about we also go to Ephesians 6 as well. With those passages too, I think the 1 Corinthians one was a great addition to that repertoire there. I feel like I was just talking to one of my friends who's starting their homeschool journey this year with their daughter, and I'm like, I told him, I'm like, look, like we've been trying this other way, for generations now, and it's not working. We look at the rates that teenagers and junior hires are leaving the faith. First and foremost as a primary concern. And it's like, I think the statistics are like upwards of 70%. And it's like, look, this isn't working. Something needs to radically shift. And we need to understand that I think we're doing something wrong, that something is disordered, and we need to bring it back into order. So that's a great addition too, because there certainly is a lot of folly
there is
going on in the world around us today. But I do not want to get I don't want to get sidetracked into all of that, because that's just
that's another show.
Yeah, definitely. So like we've mentioned a couple times, you have written the book Anyone Can Homeschool. So my question to you would be, do you really believe that? Do you believe that literally anyone can homeschool? And then also, like, what drove you to author a book with such a bold title?
I absolutely do believe anyone can homeschool. And like I said, I've been in homeschooling for 40 years. And so I've learned through experience, my experience, also my mom and dad's experience, and friends all around me. So I started telling people this quite a few years ago when I would get a message or a phone call from a single parent or someone with a special needs child, or maybe two parents who were working and they couldn't figure out how to do it. And then especially the parents who just feel like they're not qualified or equipped to teach. And I would say, oh, no, anyone can do this. I promise you, it's going to be okay. And I would just try to walk them through some different steps to get started. But I kept coming back to those words. Yeah, anyone can homeschool, because I wanted people to understand that it's not about being a teacher. It's about being a parent. And you are going to be a full-time parent, and you're adding school books to your day. It's not necessarily you turning into a classroom. And so I just kept saying that over and over. Yeah, anyone can homeschool. I do believe it because I've been there. And I was always answering questions. And my husband said, you should just write a book. And I laughed. I said, that's funny. That's a great idea. Not really intending to do it, but that thought stuck with me, and it didn't take long before I started actually putting all of my answers into the book that I was constantly typing in emails and private messages to other people. So now the answers are all in print.
Yeah. and as I was reading, I feel like every chapter was a new. I don't want to use the term excuse because I don't want it to sound too derogatory, but there are lots of different reasons that people give as to reasons why they either don't want to or don't want to try to homeschool. And so some of them seem really rational, like either like I'm a single mother, I don't have support, or we don't have the time, we're both working parents, we can't do that, or especially the equipped one, because I think that people think that they need some type of education degree to educate their kids. And I try to tell them, especially if they have little ones, like, look, you're educating already, right? Like you're teaching them their ABCs, you're teaching them what the rules of your household are. Like you're already doing it. It's a God-given role, and it's beautiful, and you've already started. Congratulations. Now deal with it. Now, deal with it. Keep going.
Yes.
So I was so struck with your story because it felt like God had, in his providence, just led you through so many ups and downs of life, and through a lot of the different common reasons. Again, I'll use that word for. It seems like God gave you lots of different opportunities to quit. I guess I'll put it that way. So, so what are some of the various life circumstances that you've homeschooled through? That you talk about maybe in the book, that you might want to share with some of our listeners to kind of encourage them, like, no, you can do this.
Yeah, I've had quite a few, and I'm going to back up before me and start with my mom. She had me at the age of 14, so she dropped out of school in the 9th grade and did not go back. And so that's where her education ended. So fast forward a few years, when I was 11 years old, she had gotten married and became a Christian. She and my dad were radically saved, and their life was radically changed by God. And part of that radical new lifestyle was to take the kids out of public school and teach them at home. That was my sister and me. And this is a mom who didn't have more than a 9th grade education, but she had the conviction and she had the desire. And so nothing else was going to stand in the way. And so that is one of the first circumstances I can tell you. Someone who did not actually have a high school diploma started homeschooling. And even back in the 80s, it was possible. There were no co-ops. There was no internet, but they had some good curriculum. And with the help of a small homeschool community, they did it. And I'm so thankful that they did. I'm so grateful that they paved the way, because that allowed me to look at homeschooling with a very positive, in a positive light, to go, oh yeah, homeschooling is cool. We're going to do this. And so I grew up into an adult, and I had no other desire. There was nothing else for my kids. I didn't even have kids yet, but I knew that they would always be homeschooled. And so in my first marriage, I was married to someone who turned out to be quite an abuser. And I had 2 daughters with that first marriage. And we went through quite a bit. And one day I finally decided it was time to leave for our safety. So we literally ran away and went to live. My parents had started building a house for their retirement. It wasn't finished yet, but they said, you can stay there. So we went and moved into this unfinished house. I left with I think I had about $300 to my name. I had my car, and we put our stuff in storage and literally started over. So there I was, a single mom, all of a sudden, broke as could be. I'd been a homemaker since my daughters were born. So even though I did have a college degree, I had already decided that my career was going to be raising my kids. And I didn't want to put them in school. I didn't want to put the baby in daycare and put my little 6-year-old in school. They'd just been through the trauma of our divorce, and I didn't want new and
Right.
different things in their life that they'd never experienced before. And so I really felt like for their mental health, it was better for us to stay together. So we did. So I worked part-time. I worked multiple jobs. Sometimes we almost had nothing. I lived literally by faith, sometimes day to day, praying that God would provide for our food, provide gas money. It was not an easy time, and I will never forget that life as a single mom. But I also won't forget that we homeschooled anyway. It wasn't a normal looking homeschool by any means, but my daughters were educated at home, and they were also protected from the world, and they were sheltered and able to grieve and deal with the trauma of divorce. Anyway, so as years went on, I was happily remarried, but I have dealt with many things besides, including lifelong migraine headaches, which do interrupt your week.
Yeah.
Bed rest every time I had a baby, so that would interrupt, a couple months of us not doing anything at all. No budget to buy curriculum, no budget for anything sometimes. We went through a severe time of poverty and came out of it. But I tell you what, there was never even a moment where I thought, maybe I should put the kids in school and get a job, or maybe I should put the kids in school and just take care of myself.
Wow.
I'll feel better if I can just rest more, or whatever. That was not an option. My conviction was solid as far as homeschooling. And so I wasn't setting out to write a book, but along the way, like you said, I do believe God presented me with opportunities to trust him with this conviction and with this desire to raise my kids at home. And there was not going to be anything besides homeschooling. So those are some of the circumstances. And so I can relate to people that have no money, or that have to work, or single parents. So many different circumstances. I've already been there. And that's why I say anyone can homeschool, because I have been there and done it, and I have the t-shirt.
And that's exactly why I knew that as soon as Justin pitched the idea of doing a couple education podcasts that I wanted to have you on. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's such a really unique perspective, like of giving your children the space and opportunity to grieve in a safe place. Without the distraction of all of these peer relationships and all of the stressors that a public, or I like to call it mass education, that mass education programs can carry with it. And that was just such a really interesting perspective, because I feel like a lot of people think like the opposite. No, they need the support. They need to have people there. They need to, but it's like, well, what's the safest place on earth, for our kids? And if that's not us, you're probably doing something wrong. So that was such a beautiful picture. When I first read that in your book, I was like, oh my gosh, that makes a lot of sense. It really was a beautiful perspective. So you've done it all. You've started a family. You've been through a divorce. You've been remarried. You've been on bed rest. And still that resolve has been present with you. And I think it's such a beautiful testimony of God's work in you as a parent. I just want to say thank you, because I think it's applaudable and very admirable. It certainly was very inspiring for me, to hear that. So thank you so much. So if anyone's listening and and you've got your pocket list of reasons, hopefully by now you've thrown that out. But but one of the
I hope
questions.
so. That's my goal.
Yes, that's personally my goal too. But I don't know. Fortunately, Justin, I don't know if Justin would agree with that. But I'll just talk without him. I'll just keep him muted for now. So my question is this, and I think that the answer will kind of be interesting. You mentioned earlier that a homeschooling experience doesn't have to look like a classroom from 9 to 3. And I think that that's something that I had to learn or unlearn, I guess, when we first started with me and my wife, with our oldest. We sat down, we were at the table, we were ready to go, and then my oldest daughter's brain is just very unique. I call it backwards, but I mean unique. She takes a while to process information, and she just is there's a lot going on in her mind, but yeah, so that was something that we had to really unlearn. So this question is like, what would you say a successful homeschool journey is? Like what is the end goal of trying to homeschool with your family, be that from pre-K to adulthood? Like, what do you think success looks like?
I will tell you, I think my answer has changed since I started 23 years ago. Because in the beginning, I thought, I'm going to raise the smartest kids out there. We're going to show the world that homeschooling is superior, and my kids will be smarter than everyone else's kids. And well, that's pride, and God's not going to bless that.
Right.
And so my kids are very normal. They're not setting out to be geniuses. So I've learned a lot. And what I would say now is, number one, that my children have a biblical worldview, that they have a view towards eternity, that they are going to heaven, and that until then, they are going to influence the world for God. That's number one. And then number two is for them to have a foundation that's strong, to give them the tools they need to be a functioning and influential citizen in this world. And there's no telling what that's going to look like for each of my kids. They'll all be different, but I mean, I want them to read and write well. I want them to understand how mathematics work. And then I want them to be able to apply that to everything else, to be able to have critical thinking skills and to understand economics and history and science and be able to discuss things intelligently and understand things. I mean, to me, that's what successful homeschooling is. And I have 5 kids and they're all 5 different. So their picture of success is going to look different from each of their siblings, and then from all of my friends who have multiple children. Every successful homeschooler is going to look a little bit different, but I think the biblical worldview is the most important thing, and then just someone who is well educated and not necessarily by the world standards.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially as our world standards are declining ever further into what is that?
Yes.
Sheol.
The abyss.
Right. Yes. The place where no one needs to go. Yeah. So that's really awesome, because I think that when we have a biblical framework about education, about what that is supposed to be as part of like kind of our God-given role as a parent, I think that what success is kind of changes in our hearts and minds. And I think you touched on that too. I think the biblical worldview is such a huge thing. Like, would I love for my son to be an engineer? Sure, that would be awesome. But I would also love for him to know God and to share that with everybody that he meets. I think would be kind of like our main.
So I have a question.
You're not allowed to ask questions. Sorry.
Well, then never mind. Let's just we'll just move forward.
Yeah.
How has homeschooling been when transitioning maybe to higher education? Has there have you found that has been a good transition? I mean, before we get into like the tools of getting started in homeschooling, I thought that might be a interesting question to.
Yeah. So I was homeschooled, and then I went on to get a bachelor's degree in business. I had no problem with the transition. I have one daughter who tried going to college, and she decided that was not the path for her. She did get in. She was accepted and went to a couple of semesters. and then she changed her mind. But the transition was easy breezy. My other kids, I don't know what they're going to choose. The daughter who's married and has a baby, she is 100% homemaker. She's not planning to go to college. So I don't know what the other ones will do, but I know from my experience, and even back, that was 1990 when I graduated from homeschooling and went to college. It's not hard at all. In fact, homeschoolers are finding that it's pretty easy to transition because in many cases they are preferred over their public school counterparts.
Yeah, well, they already have learned how to be self-motivated learners, and that is not what mass education produces. It does not produce self-motivated learners. And also, I only asked that question just out of pure curiosity, only because I don't know that certainly, I'm going to not going to say this the right way here. I don't think anyone necessarily has to go to higher education at all.
Yeah. Well, I don't care, but I know a lot of people, that's one of their concerns. You know, if we choose this route, can my kids go to college? And oh, absolutely, college, military, all of it. It's getting easier and easier all the time for homeschoolers to do everything the same.
For me, it was more so, should anyone go to higher education, in which I'm a little tentative at this point.
Yeah.
If my kids choose not to, I'm not going to have my feelings hurt.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Apart from the crippling debt, the mass psychosis hysteria that's going on in higher education seems to be disturbing, to say the least.
Yeah. Oh, you just have to be selective, I guess.
But with all of those, with all of this, just laying out of biblical construct, and unpacking your history, one of the things we're looking to do here is to help people that might be considering what it looks like after they answer that question. Anyone can homeschool, and they say, "I am part of the anyone. I am a subset of anyone.
I'm an anyone."
Then as they set off on this journey, and they might be hesitant to actually embark on the homeschooling journey, if you will, what are some of the ways that they can move maybe over the summer to sort of transition into homeschooling come this September, the more traditional time of school starting?
Well, that's a really good question. One of the things that I encourage people to do, even if they pull their child out of public school during a school year, you know, in March or September, December, anytime, I actually encourage people to de-school. And that's kind of a mental thing, but it's also practical. And that is to try to let go of everything you've ever known about public school. And that's hard to do. It's really hard. Just like you said, when you're homeschooling, you kind of want to recreate everything at the school and do it in your house. And that's very normal, very, very normal, because we've all grown up with the American way. Mm-hmm. So I encourage people to kind of try to throw that out, pretend like you've never heard of the American public school system, and decide how will I educate my children? What will I use? What do they need to know? And you don't have to sit down this summer and write down everything your kid needs to know from now till the 12th grade necessarily, but write down some goals. Like, why am I even considering this? What am I going to do? What is the reason? And how can I fix the problem maybe that we're addressing? And then have fun with your kids instead of saying, "Hey guys, we got to start these school books on September 1st. Here's the new schedule." Obviously follow your state laws, but be flexible and be a parent, be a family, not necessarily just recreate school at home. Do your research, get to know all the different homeschooling styles, look up the curriculum companies. There's so many. Don't go for a public school curriculum. Don't necessarily jump at the free online stuff. It's not nearly as high quality as these companies that have been doing this for a long time. And they create stuff specifically for moms and dads to teach their little children. There's some awesome curriculum out there. So people really need to get to know those different options out there. And then have fun learning in some different ways, just kind of casually with your kids. I like to recommend a unit study. And if you're not familiar with that, I'll just tell you real simply that it's taking any subject at all and turning it into a lesson, but in a fun way. So if you've got a son that loves dinosaurs, Start with some books at the library, or if you're like me, you're going to get your books from Answers in Genesis or someone like that on dinosaurs. And then go ahead and let them, depending on their age, draw the dinosaur, color the dinosaur, look up names, pronounce the names, copy the names down and spell them, and dig into creation and Genesis, and just think of all the different rabbit trails that a dinosaur study could give you. You could do the same thing with football, or anything at all, anything your kid is interested in, baking pie. Like, just think of all the rabbit trails. That's a unit study. And if you're not sure what to do, Google a unit study, because there's a lot of free ones on the internet that you can download. So that's just like one of the options that I tell people. Just have fun learning and see what all the possibilities are for homeschooling.
It kind of makes me think about how we dealt with prayer, starting with each one of my kids. One of the things that we were highly intentional about with prayer was starting from the earliest conception, where they could communicate, where we knew what their likes and dislikes were, and intentionally making sure that we were thankful and grateful to God for the things that they like. So engaging in the conversation, let's thank God for something tonight as we pray. What do you want to thank God for? What are things that you like? And that really helped my kids now be much more connected to prayer than I know how I was when I was their age. And so I think that, right, that idea of a unit study has that similar idea. Start with something that they enjoy, and show them that learning at home can be far more enjoyable than learning anywhere else. And of course, that does make sense. So I don't know if that was helpful.
It was. That's a great comparison.
Yeah, you did good, Justin. That was great.
Thanks, buddy.
So you kind of mentioned that there are these different homeschooling methods and styles, and perhaps some people might be shocked to find out that not everybody homeschools the same way. I didn't know if you'd be willing to maybe kind of dive into some of the different styles or different methods. Like, so my family we use classical conversations. So we're kind of like a classical Christian method. And so I just didn't know if you wanted to maybe pick a few and highlight some of the different methods that might be helpful for people to start looking these types of things up. 'Cause they might be like, homeschooling method. Like, I don't even know what that is.
Get to know the lingo. Well, the first one I always talk about is the traditional method, because it's what we are used to. It's generally what you know from public school. And although I haven't been to public school in a long, long time, I know they still are very traditional in their methods, not so much with textbooks anymore, but we all know what a textbook is. And so homeschooling curriculum can also come in the textbook form. And that's what I call traditional. And you can order the whole grade level set, in one box with the teacher guides and everything you need, every workbook for every subject. That's traditional. Another one that's very popular, like you mentioned, is classical education. And it's the way that people have been educated for centuries, actually, very much focused on, I would say it's a higher level of learning. There's a lot of focusing on what's really important, focusing on history chronologically, which I absolutely love. You'll usually find some Latin involved with classical education. It's a very solid method, very solid. Sometimes people are intimidated by it, but there's a lot of great curriculum out there to make it easy to do at home. And so, like you said, classical conversations is one of those. It's actually kind of a co-op so that you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
Another one is Charlotte Mason, or you'll hear it referred to as CM. And it's basically just a philosophy that was written by a lady in the early 1900s who had a school. She wasn't even a mom, but she had a school. And so she was trying to help kids learn in a way that was more natural to kids, which meant stories that are interesting instead of textbooks, nature study by being in nature, and learning to set good habits, and really understanding what they're learning by being able to repeat it back through narration, copying things down instead of doing grammar and English workbooks, but using copy work instead to reinforce grammar skills, which that's one of the things that we really love. And then there's relaxed homeschooling. Over the years, that's who I've become, relaxed and eclectic, which eclectic is just kind of a mixture of all of your favorite parts of all of these. And when I say relaxed, I don't relax my standards, but I relax our schedule and maybe what I require of my kids, even versus what the curriculum will require. So I will use a curriculum, but I still have the final say on what we do in the book, whether we're going to take a test or not, maybe if my child needs to repeat a lesson. So relaxed for me means we school when we want to, but we strive for excellence. And then there is unschooling, which it's a whole category of its own. And inside unschooling, there are several levels of unschoolers. And so some people see unschooling as 100% child-led. And so their kids are in charge of whatever they want to learn, whenever they want to learn it. And then there are unschoolers who have a little bit of structure, maybe with math lessons, but they let their children delve into all the other things, on their own interest timeline. So unschooling is like its own several methods of homeschooling too. So we are kind of a mix of Charlotte Mason textbook, relaxed. The longer you do it, the more you mix it up. That's what I've come to see, because I started out as traditional textbook too. We used a Becca for the first year, and it did not go over well. And so that's when I started researching and learning. Oh, there's lots to choose from, because I was raised in the 80s when there were choices, and so I just chose one. But it's changed so much since the 80s, and there's so many more options. I recommend learning these different methods, researching them a little, and then look up the different curriculum styles. And there's a really good book you can look up, and a website, Kathy Duffy, kathyduffyreviews.com. She has several books too, that like 100, I don't know, the best homeschool curriculum or something. Top homeschool picks, I think is what it's called. But what she does, she has a really neat quiz in the beginning of it that kind of has you answer questions to help guide you maybe in the direction that you might want to go. So I think she does that on her website too. That's a really helpful place to start for people who are brand new and don't even know what direction they want to go.
Oh, that's really cool. I didn't know that existed. Yeah, I think for our family, we're kind of like a mix of like classical and Charlotte Mason kind of. I mean, I feel like Classical Conversations really tries to integrate, especially with the younger kids, which my oldest is 9.
Okay.
So I feel like they really try to mix in a lot of that kind of play learning. I feel like that's kind of popular with the Charlotte Mason type crowd too. So
Yes.
I kind of feel like we're a little bit of a blend there.
Okay.
So far, we're really enjoying it. And it's really just, I think you mentioned it earlier. I forget what question it was under, but just kind of like how each kid is like so different. Like my oldest daughter, she learns things very slowly. She processes something, and it takes her a long time. My oldest son, who's younger than her, he's pretty smart. Like he picks things up really quickly.
Yeah.
He gets bored really easily and moves on to the next thing. And he can surpass and excel, in things farther than her, which kind of frustrates her a little bit. But it's just like they're so different, and trying to find that balance almost with each kid. I can't cookie cut. I can't take Evelyn's lesson and cookie cut that to Jameson. They both learn so uniquely, and just when I think of placing them in with 30 or 40 other students in a classroom, just how much of their personality gets lost. And and how much of their learning experience gets lost too.
Yeah, I found with all 5 of my kids, man, I had to learn something new with every kid, because they would throw something at me that I had not encountered before. I have 2 boys and 3 girls, and they're all different stages. And you probably hear that boys learn slower and girls learn faster, or boys learn to read late, girls learn to read early. In my house, it was the exact opposite. All of my girls read late, and all of my boys read early. So just don't put any of your kids in a box, and just kind of wait and see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
That is one of the things I was thinking as you were kind of talking there, which is great because you have identified that, over the past 23 years of doing it yourself, and 17 years before that, also going through it.
Wow, look at you, math whiz.
Hey, I did things that you've come to mix the different methods that there are to blend it into something that works best for you. And that was one of the things I kept thinking is that each of my children learns a different way. And that the freedom in homeschooling to even use different methods for each child, even on almost a per subject basis, a per concept basis, is great, because if one child learns math one way and one child learns math better the other way, you're not stuck to any particular method.
No, you're not.
And it feels like that what you're highlighting is that you can really focus on each child and their particular. I was going to do Liam Neeson, like their particular set of skills that they have, and really play up to that, which is absolutely, which is a really awesome thing.
Oh yeah, I wish we had like 5 hours to discuss all of the cool aspects of all of that, because you do have the opportunity to tailor every single kid a different curriculum. It's not always feasible, because then you have a crazy 10-hour day,
right.
But wherever possible, definitely make it personal for each of your kids, and just keep the love of learning alive.
Yes, and amen. I feel like if we can get our kids to love learning, like, they'll be in such a different place than some of their public school counterparts, where I feel like the love of learning is just sapped out of them. But
when you're looking through these, so we've outlined the methodology, just a vast array of methods that are capable of being brought into that homeschooling arena. When you're looking at the different curriculums and programs and co-ops, is there any particular thing that you look for or that you have found to be most beneficial when trying to kind of look at all these different options? Because one of the concerns I now have is someone saying, "Oh, I think I'll start homeschooling," and then you threw out to everyone that has FOMO, right? They're all like, "Oh no, there's too many options. I cannot possibly pick one. I can't do this."
Yeah.
What are some things that you have found to be beneficial or that you look for in these different methods and curriculums?
Let me just tell you, even after 23 years, I still have FOMO, because new stuff comes out and I go, "Oh, my kids are past that age now. We don't get to try it." Or maybe I should ditch this one I really love and go ahead and try that one anyway because it looks so cool. So that never really goes away, because the options are so unlimited.
That's how they get you.
But what I look for, first of all, absolutely first, is it written from a biblical worldview, if possible. The math curriculum isn't necessarily going to be written from a biblical worldview.
Math is always from a biblical worldview, because God made math. That's why it works.
Exactly. That's my point. Math, I wrote it down some here on my notes, but math is from God.
Amen.
Now, they can put Bible verses in your math book or whatever, but I want to know that whoever's writing this curriculum has the same beliefs that I do, very core beliefs, because you guys know that matters.
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely matters. And that's one of the greatest reasons to homeschool, is to give your kids a completely different education, not just pull them out of a bullying situation or, not let them be taught by liberals, but it's a totally different education if you embrace that. And so I always look for quality curriculum that's written not just Christian people, but with a biblical worldview, like a very strong biblical worldview in science and history, but even understanding why language arts are so important and how to use them effectively for God, in this world. And understanding that math does come from God, that He designed all the patterns in the universe. And so I'd rather have my math teacher teaching my kids that than the actual woke math curriculum that you can find now and that they use in many public schools. So that's my first one. And then after that, I just want to find something that fits my budget and that also fits my style. I said we're relaxed. We school year round, which just means we never have a school year. We just keep going whenever. So we had school today. We had about 4 hours straight today, even though it's Saturday, because that's how we roll, because we didn't on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday this week. So our schedule is our schedule and nobody else's, and we do what works for us. So I want to have something that's flexible, and most homeschool curriculum is. If you're in an online program, though, where you have to be logged in at certain times, that's not going to work. So, that would not work for us. And then I want quality. I want high quality. You can get free stuff and you can get quality stuff. Sometimes they're not the same. And so I've been where I needed the free stuff, as we talked about in my book. But it's worth it. It's worth the money if you have it to look for quality. And I don't mean spending thousands of dollars a year, but quality materials that teach your kids to love what they're learning, that really dig in deep and teach them to appreciate good language, to appreciate history and understand God's world and all of those things.
Yeah, well, it's going to be really hard. We live in New Jersey, and I think the average cost per student per year is like over $26,000. So no matter how much money you want to throw at it, you're still not throwing as much as the state.
Texas, I thought we were bad.
It's the reported cost. Now, what you need to know about New Jersey is about 21,500 of those dollars is just going into politicians' pockets.
Yeah, I'm
and
sure.
then they spend the other $500 per student on, air conditioning.
I know they spend
like
so much, and for what? What's the outcome?
Right.
It's never good.
They get rich. That's pretty much it. They don't give the teachers anything. They give the union reps stuff, and they take it themselves. And I despise them.
Not the only one.
I feel like we kind of talked a little bit about finding a good homeschooling rhythm, like with some of the kind of triage questions for curriculum, for methods and styles. So I'm throwing a curveball at you here. I didn't send you this question earlier, but I just thought about it as we were talking. So here's this thing. So say this is under our section, getting started, right? So say you finally convince somebody to say, all right, look, I'm going to start looking into this stuff. We're going to make a switch. It's going to be hard, but we're going to do it. So here's the biggest thing, and it was a big problem for me and my family. How do you think someone should come out as a homeschooling family to the in-laws? to the in-laws, to the parents? How do you tell them? How do you get them to understand?
Well, just be confident in your decision, and say, this is what God has convicted us to do, and there is no other way for us. Welcome aboard. I know it's hard because some families do have that struggle that they're going to get a lot of pushback or criticism. I hate that so much because they're your kids to raise no matter what. And you actually are making a very wise and solid choice to choose homeschooling. It's not abuse. And if only more people could understand that, they'd be supportive. But I think that lack of support comes from not understanding what homeschooling is. Just a lot of the stuff we've talked about tonight is probably not what most people know homeschooling is. Like, you do set your own schedule. You buy whatever curriculum you want. There's a couple of states that are pretty strict, but for the most part, all Americans can homeschool very flexibly, however they want, and they get to teach their kids about God all along the way. And so you're probably not going to please everyone, and you don't have to. That's my opinion. Just be bold with your choices. And judging by what I've seen a little bit from y'all, I think you're bold. So
we try to be.
That's what I recommend. Boldness.
Yeah, I think I've finally gotten my mom over that hump. I think she's finally like, oh my gosh, this is fine. Because at first it was, well, what about socialization?
Yep,
You
that's
know, how
common.
are they, like
The S
that type of
word.
thing, the S word.
Now, Nikki, there's important things to note, and that is Jesse's weird, and and there's there's concerns, but no, there really was. I don't know. I don't know why you looked at me when you said that. Like I didn't have any. I wasn't like upset about it or anything. I was like, go, you knock yourself out. I mean, as long as here's how we started. Like we started this whole like deal with this whole podcast with talking about how corrupt the New Jersey health education was becoming and how they were promoting sodomy and fellatio to kids starting at the age of 12. And it was like, you know what?
Yeah.
we're gonna have to pause this because this is just inappropriate for anyone. And so we've been following this a lot. Now, we always outline that we don't inherently. That's not true. Jesse sometimes does.
I was about to say, I feel like my line is a bit harder.
We don't inherently like judge anyone in sin for any of their education choices. That's not our role. But what we are emphatic on is that every parent is an educator. Always, that is their role by God as having been given stewardship of God's children. You are to you are to raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And so since we can identify that very clearly, we have said that each particular option of school requires different things in a more intensive way than maybe the other. Because no matter what, you're called to sacrifice for your kids. And I'm just throwing this out there. I know this is we are laser focused in on homeschooling here, which is a wonderful and glorifying, dare we say, biblical option to educate
I will
your
say
kids.
it, yes.
But we're not trying to heap shame upon you if this is not where you're at. But don't forget that you have more commitments in other ways to get there. You cannot possibly. If you're not going to be with your child, you have to be at every board meeting. You have to know what every piece of paper coming home is. You have to know those teachers. You have to know what those teachers like, dislike. You have to know and that level, that there's a time commitment there already. Like you're not educating your child, but you're now having to invest that time as a special investigator. and that's, so you haven't really gained the time. You're just now investing it in a different way.
Right.
And similarly,
and
good.
That's what I always think about the parents that say, we're going to stay involved. We're going to all the school board meetings. We're going to fight. And I think, okay, so you go to your monthly school board meetings and you have 2 or 3 minutes to say something. And sometimes they're going to cut you off like they do here. But every single day, your kid is still in that system. Every single day, 7 or 8 hours a day, while you're devoting 1 month, one meeting a month to arguing it with the school board for 3 or 4 minutes. That's not effective. They're still raising your kid while you're trying to do the fight. And I applaud going to school board meetings and speaking up. But I recommend take your kid out and go to the school board meetings and fight for the other kids instead.
I like Nikki a lot.
I recommend taking. I recommend going to the school board kids not just to fight for the kids, but to destroy the public education system. But nonetheless,
I agree.
Metaphorically, in Minecraft, in Minecraft.
We got to transition to the big picture somehow.
Oh my gosh,
we could talk to her for forever.
Yeah, no. One of the things, this big picture question just came out of something you had just said. You mentioned that, and this is true. One of the reasons that people are pulling their kids out of public education and considering homeschooling are not inherently the biblical reasons you've outlined. The obvious, clear command by God to raise children up by their parents in their education, and that is a holistic, right? View of the child. That paideia of education. All right. So you've mentioned that. So,
nice.
But then you said the not to be taught by liberals, right? That is a reason that they've highlighted. They just don't want their kids taught by these radical, sexually progressive nut jobs with blue hair, and we have no idea what's going on.
Right.
Is there a way that we can be utilizing homeschooling in order to leverage the gospel suddenly
To our kids or
to
the
these
rest
people
of the
that are
world?
now they identify my kids can't go here because that's insane, and they're pulling their kids out to homeschool them. Is
Oh,
there a
okay,
way
I
to
get it. Yeah.
leverage the gospel in that? Because it feels like it feels like it should be.
I believe so, because what you basically are going to get back to is biblical principles. I mean, if even a secular person says, well, I just don't want these, like you said, the blue-haired liberals teaching my kids, that's a great time to ask a question. Well, so what is it about this blue-haired liberal that you don't want them teaching your child? Why do you not want them teaching that? Why do you believe that's wrong? Do you know that comes from scripture, that, it goes all the way back to God's laws, that, a man and a woman were created in God's image, and that a man marries a woman and nothing else, I think it's a great way to just point them back to scripture and say there is a standard and it comes from God. And that's why we are doing this. Why don't you join us this way? And yes, that's a great opportunity to preach the gospel.
I couldn't agree more. I've been seeing this. I mean, I see this. I see pulling your kids out of the public school system. One of the things I love about me and Jesse is we both have a wide range of resources we're trying to pull people to. And they're like, man, the public education system is really bad. And we're both like, yeah, hey, we have some ideas for you. Because we want to pull them into a conversation and then be like, and the reason the public school system is so bad is because it hates God. That's why it's so bad. Exactly. Come love God. Come love the Lord who wants to save you from sin and death. And I think it's fabulous.
There's a push here in Texas right now, and it sounds so nice on the surface, but it really just misses the big picture. And they're trying to put the 10 Commandments back in all the schools or all government buildings, but I think it's the public schools. But that's not really going to change education. And because anybody that's studied education in America knows that public education beginning in the 20th century is godless. It's inherently godless, and hanging the 10 Commandments on the wall in a hallway is not going to change what those teachers are teaching in the classroom because the government said teach this. So yeah, it's absolutely a godless system, and I feel bad for any kid that stays there.
Wouldn't it be shocking for if our 2023 culture went back to public education in let's say the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, and for them to just sit there and realize that if it wasn't direct quotations of the scripture, it was some form of a story that was even worse than what the scripture was trying to outline in morality. Wouldn't it be insane? Their faces would melt right off if they were to see what it was. The thing is,
they know it and they hate it.
Yeah.
It's that's another show too. But yeah, that's how we got.
I would love to have that.
That's how we got this country, because we started out really well.
I would love to go. I would love to go over the old Deluder Satan Act with you if you ever, like one.
That'd be great.
I'd love to devote a whole episode to that. That'd be super fun.
All right, so we have to have Nicki on again.
All right, sorry. I'm sorry about nerding. History nerding out. Stop nerding about.
I'm glad that you're enjoying this conversation, though. It validates me.
If we were to ask you this point blank, just your natural reaction, do you think public education is a viable option for Christian parents in 2023?
No.
All right.
I'm not embarrassed to say that.
Why do you say that?
Why? Well, as we stated earlier, it is a godless system. A lot of the reasons that I see people using to keep their kids in public school, one of the main reasons is salt and light. My kid is going to be a missionary to the other kids, and
just like Paul said to do.
Yeah, send your children, right? As Israel Wayne said, if it was going to work, it would already have worked. But our kids are not changing the world in the public school system. If your kid loves Jesus and goes to public school, I'm glad your kid loves Jesus. There's a whole lot more to this life in 2023, though, because it's a different world than even the one I grew up in. it's not enough to be a Christian. You have to know why you're a Christian. You have to know your scriptures. You have to understand what the world thinks and be able to counter those beliefs. I'm going through the book Mama Bear Apologetics with some friends right now, and we're talking about how important it is because 20 years ago, you didn't have people attacking Christianity or Genesis or marriage, not on any level like it is now. And a Christian needs to not just go to church and love Jesus, but be able to give an answer for what they believe. And kids are not qualified to do that yet. I mean, you can teach them some apologetics, but what they're getting hit with in the public school is anti-God, it's anti-family, it's anti-capitalism, it's anti-everything that we stand for.
How dare you? Sorry.
And so, yeah, I have to say, no, it's not a viable option for Christians because whatever you can teach them, the public school is spending multiple more hours per day teaching the exact opposite. And so it's not enough that your child loves Jesus if they're at public school. And I know that makes people very angry when I say it, but it is the truth. And I can only say it because I've had so many parents contact me saying, we made a mistake. We should never have let our Christian kid go to public school. It gets worse in middle school and high school, but they're starting in kindergarten now. So I would not send my child there and say they're going to be a missionary because they haven't been trained.
They're not soldiers.
They're not. They're not ready yet.
I mean, one of the things.
How many parents are ready to argue?
Right.
How many parents can even argue?
That's correct.
Real issues today, and they're saying that their kids can.
No, when you have wolves in sheep's clothing in the pulpit, there's no reason why you just have a bunch of fat, lazy sheep. Fat, lazy sheep are easy to catch and eat by wolves.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I've often said that I'm less afraid of putting my daughter into the public education system as she moves towards high school because I've not met someone as uniquely wired as her with the gospel, with apologetics. And at the same time, I look at someone and say, but why would I do that? Why would I do that? Why would I not let her continue to leverage this amazing faith and this ever deepening, reasonable answers that she's developing? Why wouldn't I let her continue to develop those things? So that when as she's moving towards that adult stage and she moves into actually conversing with adults, they can have an adult conversation where she is seeking to reason with them instead of high school.
Instead of a little kid thinking, I don't even know if I'm supposed to talk back to my teacher, you know?
Right, exactly.
It's not even fair.
There's a clear hegemony issue there in the public school system as well.
Well, it's like a greenhouse. You know, we don't put our little baby plants outside until they've been hardened. You know, if you've ever started seedlings indoors, you have to keep them indoors and gradually let them have a little bit of fresh air every day, gradually. And you put them in the greenhouse if the wind is too high or the sun is too hot. And oh my gosh, don't ever put your pets out in the wintertime or the animal rights people will come after you. But the same people say, send your kids out there and just sink or swim. So we're supposed to treat our pets better than we treat our own children.
Oh.
Well,
that also is a whole nother podcast topic.
I did have a lady this week tell me that they were. This is when you bring it up. It's just like I've seen the bumper sticker, right? That I'm a Greyhound father. I'm a, whatever pet. I literally had someone say, Happy Father's Day to you. And I said, well, I hope you guys, if you're able to share in, whatever fathers in your lives, I hope they have a happy Father's Day. And she shared, she doesn't have any fathers in her life. Well, I mean, but her husband did have 2 children previously. So I'm like, well, then makes him a father, but nonetheless, but we did get a puppy. And I said, I said, no. Don't
do that.
Let's not compare your dog to my children. Let's not do that. Right. No, immediately I see the spinning of the wheels trying to switch gears. And it did amicably. I have wonderful people that have received my weirdness well at this point by now where I work. But nonetheless, yes, let's not do that. Dogs are not people and cats cannot be your children. You
know what I just realized this today. I'm sorry, this is a complete tangent. But
this is our life, Nick. This is it.
So we were watching Boss Baby today.
Oh no.
And And so the whole thing with Boss Baby, right, is that there's this company that makes the babies for the parents, and but the problem is that the dog company was making dogs cuter than babies, so people were shifting away from babies into dogs, and I'm like,
oh my gosh,
they've hit this square on the nose. That's exactly what's happening. So now I have to rewatch it and really analyze all of the themes of the movie. But but I was like, oh my gosh, that's real. But anyway, I digress. So one thing that we definitely wanted to talk about, and I know that we're running low on time, so don't feel like you have to rush or anything. But I have seen you. I have seen you kind of speak against, or at least I think I have, and you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But I feel like I have seen you post against things like the voucher programs that some conservative states are doing, where the money follows the parent or some form of it. There's probably several different iterations of it. Do you see any dangers? Like, what are the dangers that you see from programs like that, or do you think that those are beneficial for families to take part in to help ease the pain of removing themselves from the public education sphere?
I do not believe they are beneficial at all to homeschoolers, or especially to homeschool freedom. Because now I'm coming from Texas, where we have really great laws here for school. In Texas, we're considered private schools if we homeschool, and private schools have no regulation under state law. So basically, we do what we want. So I do speak from that vantage point, but I know many, many states are similar in the United States. But even the ones that have more strict homeschool laws, we don't want to make them worse. And when you get state money involved in private education, it becomes state education. That's just the simplest way to put it. And if you've taken your kids out of state education, you don't want to put them back in, even if it means they're at your house. And that's basically what it is, whether it's called school choice, parent empowerment, money follows the child, education savings accounts. It's got a lot of names now because they have to keep rewording it to make it sound cool and awesome. But they're all the same. It's basically a voucher, even if a politician says, no, it's not a voucher. It is a voucher. If the state's giving you money, you don't want it. Trust me, because what they're going to do is get a further foothold into your living room or your kitchen, wherever you homeschool, where before you're private. Once you take that state money for your children's education, then they're going to start regulating how you can educate your child at home. And a lot of people think, oh, that's okay, because they've come out of public education and they're already used to that. They don't understand that this is so different. Homeschooling is so different. And in many good ways, we don't want to be like the public school anymore. We want to be different. We want to be private. And so some people say, well, you don't have to take the money. I'll take it, but you don't have to if you're against it. What people really need to understand is that all homeschoolers are judged the same. And if you don't homeschool, you probably judge all homeschoolers the same. Take the Shiny Happy People documentary on Amazon right now and tell me that not all homeschoolers are viewed like the Duggars in some way. Because I don't know if y'all have watched that yet, but basically the documentary creators are lumping all Christians and all homeschoolers into this one category, which we all know is not the same.
No.
But homeschoolers are lumped into a category. We're all backwards. We're all unsocialized. We're all uneducated, whatever. So if homeschooler A decides to take the funds from the state, homeschooler B doesn't, but homeschooler A is not reporting well in their test scores or whatever it is that the state is going to come check on, because they will. They have to have oversight. If this homeschooler that took the money does not perform well or is letting the ball go on some things, all schoolers will be judged according to that family. That's the long game. It's not going to happen next week. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's already happened. It was either in West Virginia or Utah, where they passed a law that said, oh, we're only going to look at the people that are taking the money. And it didn't take long, within a year or two, that they were already saying, okay, all homeschoolers are going to be judged the same way. Whether you take the state money or whether you don't, we're all going to lump you in the same category. That was an official state law that they were trying to pass. I think the homeschoolers defeated it. But my point is, they will try it. And in some places, they will succeed. So keep the government out of homeschooling. Do it privately. Be independent. Don't be needy. Find a way. There's so many ways, and that's what one of the things I talk about in my book over and over and over is money. How to work part-time, how to homeschool anyway, how to afford it, all of that stuff. It is not impossible.
So I have two thoughts as the more
Okay.
What will I call myself? More policy inclinated of the two of us. Does that sound accurate?
I like a good policy. I don't know.
Do you know much?
Are there any?
Do you know much public policy?
Me?
Yeah.
What do you mean? We talk about the same things on this show all the time.
I spend a lot more time consuming public policy data than you jerk.
That's true. You sit in a truck all day with an earbud in. Like,
anyway, I have two.
Some of us have lives.
I have two questions.
Okay.
One of the things which now right off the bat, you're right. Wherever the money goes, regulation then tends to follow. That's just a natural inclination of where the money goes. From your perspective, it seems the concern, first off, is going to be that there will be a measurement of standard then applied across the board to homeschoolers. Now, here's my question: if this is just a question, if that policy of measurement was equivalent across the board for education, would that make a difference in receiving the funds? And what I mean is, if that measurement was given to homeschoolers and public school students alike, would it then alleviate some of the tension? I.e., if homeschoolers are are assessed with public schoolers in some sort of similar standard at the end of their education to show that they are at least proficient in minimal standards of XYZ, is that an acceptable measurement?
Well, before you said at the end of their education, I would have said, no, it's not acceptable because whether people want to believe it or not, there is such a thing still as Common Core. Everybody is on a standard timeline in all public schools.
Correct.
There may be slight differences between states, but everybody learns certain things at certain grade levels all across the country. In homeschooling, we don't have to do it that way. And that's one of the great things about our freedom is that we don't have to do it that way. And so if we don't learn things on the same timeline, then our kids are not going to test the same as a public school kid.
Right.
You know, not to say that we don't teach our kids all the same things, but I don't care what grade they learn certain things in, as long as they're always progressing.
Right.
So I would not want my kids held to a public school standard. At the end of 12th grade, absolutely, I don't care, but I don't think that they're going to do it that way. So
right. I'm just looking for ways. I'm just looking for. So here's my balance. My balance as a person who hates the government having their hands on money, and balancing the person who knows that regulation follows the money, is to find a way to regulate that money in a way that gets it out of the government's hands and into my hands as soon as possible, because the government sucks at having my money. And also to make sure that the regulation that would then follow that is something that I can actually live inside of in a way that allows me to glorify God. So if by the end of 12th grade, there was a measurement to say that this child has been educated proficiently at XYZ, and that is the same standard that they're holding kids that are being poorly educated inside of public education or mass education, I think that would be at least one way in which I could see it working. And there's another way that I had a thought of, and I don't know about your perspective on this.
Okay.
If for those children that are homeschooled, they have this, whatever the limit is, because in every state it's different. I think Arizona just passed something that recently goes up to $8,200, which, by the way, just so we're all on the same page, is a fraction of what they're spending on the child inside of the state. Maybe at the most 40% probably to 50% of what they're spending per child. So they're still keeping a great deal of it, everyone. Don't get too excited. But nonetheless, that is a chunk of change for each family.
Yeah.
If there was a way to say, hey, you're a homeschool parent, all right, you are keeping us from spending this on this child. So we have this surplus. You have up to fill in the blank, of which you are allowed to claim tax refunds in, right? Like you have here's up to $10,000 in refunds for school related expenses, and that could be your gas and tickets to a certain museum. That could be, right? So we have a broad range of things we could put into that. Would that be another way in which they could actually give back to you the tax money you're spending that you are not using in any way, that they're just stealing from you and giving to other people?
Well, in Texas, we don't file state income taxes. So it would have, for us, that would have to come from the federal government, which I absolutely don't want them to get their hands in. Now, I know other states, have a state income tax.
You don't have income tax in Texas? Wait a second. You don't have income tax in Texas?
Not a state income tax.
I thought you had. Man, I'll just add you to the list. I have a list of states that don't have income tax, and now I didn't know Texas was one of them. I thought they had a small income tax, but
we have horrendous property taxes, though.
Well, every state gets you. Honey, don't live in New Jersey where you have a state income tax.
So I'm not going to.
You have income tax, you have a horrendous property tax, and you have VAT taxes, value-added taxes. You have all three taxes in New Jersey. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Most states have two. You'll get two at the most. Some states only have one. Maybe you just have value-added taxes and you don't have property or state. But most states have property and VAT, value-added taxes. But very few states have all three, where they're taking your income, property, and value-added taxes. And I'm like, why? But we all complain about New Jersey.
It's so that Governor Murphy can buy a $15,000 rug for his governor mansion.
We just keep saying God has called us to minister here, Nikki, and that is why
we're here for the ministry, not for the
strangers in a strange land.
That's right. Amen. I don't know. Did we just?
I think we could start wrapping up.
We got to wrap it up.
I think we got to.
All right. So this is probably the greatest way to wrap it up. This is you're trapped on an elevator, right? You're trapped on an elevator with obviously a parent, a parent with children that they're educating, all right? That they're in charge of their education. Mm-hmm. If you had 1 minute, right, on this journey on the elevator to convince them to switch to home education, what would be your pitch? What would you say?
Well, I would say if you could imagine a completely different childhood for your children. They start the day with a good night's sleep. They have a family breakfast, probably healthier food. And then they get to have the childhood that you always wanted for them. They might start the morning with Bible study, with music and singing, family time, perhaps outdoor play. And then they get to have a custom education that you chose, with a biblical worldview where math is God's design. History is taught from all perspectives, including church history, ancient and biblical history together. They learned the difference between capitalism and communism. They learn about all races and all cultures equally. In science, they learn that God created the world and that everything he created is good and has a purpose. Imagine, if you could, that homeschooling is not about parents becoming school teachers. It's about taking children out of government-run institutions and giving them a childhood and an education tailored to their needs. That is homeschooling.
Oh, that was pretty good.
That was wonderful.
I
wish we had recorded this to share this to posterity.
You haven't been recording this whole time?
No, I'm just kidding. We've been recording.
Okay, good, because I was going to fire you right here on the spot.
How will I ever live with the income loss?
Well, since you don't get paid, I'll just have to kill you. In Minecraft.
Oh, my gosh.
Nikki, this was an absolute an absolute joy and a pleasure. We are so grateful for you to share this. How can people connect with you and find you, given that they may have questions now, maybe more questions that they're like, well, I definitely don't trust these Gruber guys to answer these questions, but Nicki Truesdell sounds like she might know some things. How can they get a hold of you?
Well, my website is my name, nickitruesdell.com. And actually, if you go to the menu there is a Homeschool 101 page, and I have a lot of blog posts. I've been blogging since 2009, so I've got quite a bit of information there. And
that's 14 years of blogs. 14 years of blogs.
Wow, you are so quick with these computations.
I am not a numbers person. So I try to make a page with everything in the order that I think new homeschoolers might ask questions. So Go to that page. I'm also on Facebook, Nicki Truesdell. I think it's Nicki Truesdell blog, and then Instagram, and I'm on Twitter. So I'm post daily on all my social media, but you can definitely contact me through Facebook or Instagram Messenger. And I also, like I mentioned at the very beginning of the show, my side hobby is reprinting old history books that went out of print and that I think are valuable enough for us to read again today, because the internet is not history anymore, and we need the printed word on paper. And I believe in home libraries and preserving history in print. So that is called Knowledge Keepers Bookstore, and that has a separate website, knowledgekeepersbookstore.com. And that also has its own Instagram and Facebook page. So those are all the ways to find me. And sometimes I speak. I have kind of canceled a couple of things this year because of family responsibilities, but I speak locally around Texas and Oklahoma, and regularly write for Expository Parenting Ministries and also for the Learning Well Journal magazine.
Awesome.
I think that covers it.
I love all of those pages. I follow all of those pages. I didn't know all of that. And now I have somewhere to spend all of my money this summer to buy books that will be added to the stack of things that I have to read.
Yes, I do want to say I may have a book. So I have so many questions about this. We cannot possibly keep these people any longer. This has been an absolute joy. We are so thankful for this opportunity. I just want to clarify. Could you spell NickiTruesdell.com? Not the .com part, but just your name.
NickiTruesdell.
There you go. Add a .com, and you will be brought to NickiTruesdell.com, and you can get connected to all those resources.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Awesome. And that's also how you can find her on IG and Facebook. And, also, if you just go to the website, you can probably click the little buttons at the bottom and find all those things too. So get to it. Mm-hmm. Get to it, everybody. And that brings us to the end of this awesome eepisode. We are so thankful to have had you on, Nicki Truesdell. It was absolutely wonderful. I'm using your full name now because it was
fun. Thank you.
I feel like every time I use it now, it's a plug for your website. All right. But this has been absolutely awesome. And,
it is.
See, perfect. At the end of every episode, we like to encourage you, dear Christian, to seize the faith.